Hello and welcome to our online class. Today we are going to discuss our second chapter of class 10th in social science. This is the chapter of history, one of the most important chapter in Indian history, that is nationalism in India. So we are going to discuss all the important points of this chapter one by one. Let's see what is given in the content. In this chapter we have four main parts of the chapter. First part of the chapter is covering the First World War, Khilafat Movement, non-cooperation movement, differing trends within the movement towards civil disobedience, the sense of collective belonging. So these parts of the chapter we will discuss one by one. First of all, let's go ahead to the First World War. Although before First World War, it is necessary to tell you that this chapter is covering events of Indian national movement from 1920s to civil disobedience movement, mainly Mahatma Gandhiji's role in Indian national movement, his two famous movements, and other important events which happened during this moment we will discuss. So first of all, let's start First World War, because that was the period when First World War broke out in 1914. If you remember, we discussed in the previous chapter also that on 28th of June 1914 First World War began, and the reason of this First World War was the death of Austria-Hungary prince by a Serbian student. Later on, Serbia denied to fulfill the demands of Austria-Hungary and Serbia was supported by Britain, France, Russia, whereas Austria-Hungary was supported by Germany and Turkey. So these two groups had a war between them, which were supported by other countries too. So this war led huge destruction in the world. Here we are going to discuss some of the impacts of this First World War, which is our first para of this chapter. So main impacts of this First World War were: number one, new economic and political situation, because after this war economic crisis began in the world. Most of the countries which were rich and prosperous earlier took loan from America and other nations, and in political situations also we can say that America emerged as a world power after this world war. Second one, huge increase in the defense expenditure. So this time most of the countries, they started investing on the defense equipments. If you remember, after the First World War, Hitler and Mussolini, these two famous dictators, arose in the world. Most of the time countries spent their money in the war weapons. Third, taxes increased in the country. It was a burden on the mind of the people. Income tax was introduced first time on the income of the people. Prices of the items also almost doubled. This was the time of hardship, when there was hunger and starvation in the country. There was forced recruitment in defense forces by most of the countries. Crops in most of the countries failed and there was shortage of food. As you all know that in 1917 there was Russian Revolution that was due to this shortage of food only, along with the other regions. Influenza epidemics, famine, that increased in the world because of these wars. And if you remember, in this war millions of people, they perished, they lost their life. So after this we are going to discuss our first 1.1 para of this chapter, the idea of Satyagrah. As you all know that this word Satyagrah, it has come from two main words. Satya means truth and Agrah. Agrah means request. Here you can see that Mahatma Gandhi ji, he used this Satyagrah terminology in South Africa, where he succeeded in all the movements against the racial discrimination. And when he returned back to India in January 1915, he gave this idea of Satyagrah to people. By Satyagrah, he meant, you have to understand that Satyagrah means it emphasized the power of truth and need to search for the truth. Secondly, he meant that if the cause was true, if the struggle was against injustice, then physical force was not required to fight against the oppressor. Mahatma Gandhi ji, he believed that all satyagrahis, they must use non-violent method, as non-violence could unite all the Indians. And he succeeded in this idea of Satyagrah, as he launched three famous Satyagraha movements before his active role in Indian politics. So the first was in Champaran, Bihar, where he inspired the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation owners. Secondly, in 1917, in Kheda district of Gujarat, he helped the peasants who were affected by the crop failure. So now peasants, they were supported by Mahatma Gandhi ji, and Gandhi ji helped them not to pay high revenue because of this situation. In 1918, Mahatma Gandhi ji, he went to Satyagrah. He went to Ahmedabad to help the meal workers of Ahmedabad, because these meal workers were not getting good wages and bonus from the meal owners. So here also Gandhiji succeeded in his mission. Coming to next part of this chapter, point 1.2, the Rowlatt Act. As you all know that Britishers, they ruled in India in 1919. They introduced one very infamous act, Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act of 1919, which is also known as Rowlatt Act or Black Act, by which any Indian could be imprisoned for 2 years without any reason. This authority government had to imprison any of the Indian. Mahatma Gandhi ji was against this unjust law, and he started his hartal on 6th of April 1919. Rallies were organized in various cities. People went on strike. There was hartal in different areas. Local leaders, they were picked up by the Britishers from Amritsar. Mahatma Gandhi ji, he was barred, denied to enter in Delhi region, and ultimately on 10th of April, police of Amritsar fired upon the peaceful procession. In most of the country, martial law was imposed and command was given to General Dyer. Here you can see that It was a condition in which most of the people, they faced humiliation. More than 5 people could not assemble at one place. They were forced to salute British officers. They were forced to rub their nose on the ground. Because of two important leaders' arrest in Punjab, Dr. Satyapal and Saifuddin Kichlu, people, they assembled in Jallianwala Bagh at Amritsar on the occasion of Baisakhi on 13th April 1919. But General Dyer, he came with his troops, entered in the area. He blocked all the exits, because there was only one exit from this park. People, they were asked to evacuate the area within 3 minutes, but after few seconds only, General Dyer, he gave order to fire on the people. Thousands of people got injured and more than 379 people, they died as per the official record, although this data was in more in number. After this incident, there was again martial law in the country, and most of the people were forced to crawl on the streets. They were forced to salute Britishers. They were forced to knee down on the ground. Ultimately, Mahatma Gandhi ji, he called off his Satyagraha movement. Coming to our next point of this chapter, that is Khilafat movement. As you all know that in First World War, Britishers, they promised Indian Muslims that they will not harm the dignity of Khalifa of Turkey, who was the religious guru of the Muslims. But in this war, they imposed a harsh peaceful treaty on Ottoman Empire and their religious spiritual guru Khalifa. Ultimately, Khilafat Committee was formed in Bombay in March 1919. Mahatma Gandhi ji also toured with Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali in the country. This movement ended in 1922, although it brought a feeling of nationalism among the people. People came together. Now, this was the time to launch a nationwide movement. Hence, Mahatma Gandhi ji, he wrote in his famous book Hind Swaraj that British rule was established in India with the cooperation of Indians only, and had survived only because of this cooperation. If Indians refused to cooperate, British rule in India would collapse within a year and Swaraj will come. Means this was the statement written by Gandhiji in his book Hind Swaraj, in which he appealed for the non-cooperation to the people. And in September 1920 and later on in Nagpur session of December 1920, in the session of Indian National Congress, Mahatma Gandhiji started his non-cooperation movement against the Britishers. In this movement, most of the foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops were picketed, foreign clothes burnt, in a huge bonfire. Import of foreign goods declined. People, they started using Swadeshi items. Students, they left their schools. Here you can see there was surrender of titles by many leaders. Even Mahatma Gandhi also left his title. Boycotted of civil services by the people of India. Most of the soldiers, they boycotted army, they boycotted police, courts, legislative assemblies, schools, foreign goods. As this movement continued for 2 years, but in Feb 1922, Chauri Chora incident took place, in which 21 policemen and 1 daroga was burnt alive by the angered mob, and Gandhiji called off this movement. Now in point 2.2 we will discuss how this rebellion spreaded in countryside areas. So before that, how it spreaded in towns. In towns, this movement spreaded in very enthusiastic manner. Thousands of students, they left their schools and colleges. Teachers, headmasters, they resigned. Lawyers, they gave up their legal practices. Even the council elections were boycotted in the country. Foreign goods were boycotted. Although this movement had a very slow pace in the later phase because of some reasons. The one was that indigenous goods like khadi was very expensive. All the people could not wear khadi. Hence it slowed down in some of the areas. Here let's discuss about the rebellion in countryside, point 2.2 of this chapter. Rebellion in countryside, meanwhile, this movement spreaded in many villages, tribal areas also, except the towns. Here we have one example of this movement, that is in Awadh. Peasants, they launched this movement under the leadership of Baba Ramchandra, who was a sannyasi, and earlier he was an indentured labor in Fiji. So peasants of this area, they demanded reduction of their revenue, abolition of the begar, and social boycott of these landlords. Even in many places, Nai, Dhobi, they denied to give any kind of privileges to these landlords. By June 1920, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru also began touring these areas, and Awadh Kisan Sabha was set up. Later on, 300 branches of Awadh Kisan Sabha were set up in the country. In 1921, peasants, they attacked on the houses of the talukdars and merchants. Bazaars were looted. In many areas, they declared that now they will not pay any tax. This all was in the name of non-cooperation movement. Here we have another example of countryside movement in Gudam Hills of Andhra Pradesh. This was a tribal movement which is also called a guerrilla method of movement by the tribal peasants in Gudam Hills of Andhra Pradesh in early 1920s by Alluri Sitaram Raju, one of the famous leader of this movement, who claimed himself some special powers and some astrological predictions to heal the people. Even he claimed that he could survive even bullet shot. He led this movement. People got inspired by Mahatma Gandhiji's idea of non-cooperation. They spotted Alluri Sitaram Raju, attacked on police stations, attempted to kill many British officials, and ultimately in 1924 Alluri Sitaram Raju, he was captured and executed. Coming to our next point of this chapter 2.3, Swaraj in plantation. In plantations, as you all know, that under the Inland Immigration Act of 1859, plantation workers, they had no permission to leave the tea plantation without the permission of the owners. Although they were not getting permission after joining these plantation areas or after coming in the hands of the clutches of these plantation owners. When Gandhiji launched this movement, non-cooperation, now plantation workers, they defied the orders of their authorities. They fled away from the plantation areas, although because of strikes in the country, they could not reach to their homes, and most of them were brutally beaten up by the police. Coming to our third part of this chapter, which is towards civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is a movement launched by Mahatma Gandhiji, which was launched in 1930, began with Dandi March and ended in 1934. So some incidents before this movement which forced Mahatma Gandhiji to launch this movement are as follows. The first one is the foundation of Swaraj party. When Gandhiji called off his first movement, first nationwide movement, this non-cooperation in 1922, after Chori Chora incident, some leaders of Indian National Congress, they felt that Gandhiji's decision was not good. He had taken a wrong decision because nationwide movement was there. People, they were inside the bars. So it was the wrong decision. That's why they decided to form a new party under the leadership of Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru, and Khilafat Swaraj party was formed. The purpose of this party was to remain in councils of Britishers and to achieve Swaraj. Although after the death of C.R. Das, this party again merged in Indian National Congress. Second incident before the civil disobedience movement was arrival of Simon Commission. As you all know that in 1927 this Indian Statutory Commission was set up, which is popularly known as Simon Commission. This commission came in India in 1928 along with 7 members. Although out of these 7 members there was no Indian, all members were white under the leadership of John Simon. That's why this commission was boycotted by Indian people. In most of the areas, Simon Go Back slogan was raised. Black flags were shown to Simon Commission. There was Hartal and Band in most of the areas, and ultimately, due to this incident in Lahore, Lala Lajpat Rai was lathi charged by Saunders, which revenge was taken by Bhagat Singh and his associates. One another incident before civil disobedience movement was Nehru report, which was presented by Pandit Motilal Nehru and his other associate members. The main objective of this report was to bring dominion status for the country in 1928, although this report was not accepted by other organizations, other political parties like Muslim League in India, because they were not happy with Indian National Congress policies. Because of these incidents which were happening in the country, ultimately under the leadership of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Indian National Congress members, they reached in Lahore on the bank of river Ravi, and in December 1929 on the bank of river Ravi they hoisted a flag of India and decided to celebrate complete Independence Day on 26th of January 1930. And on 26th of January 1930, complete Independence Day was celebrated. If you remember that we have taken this date 26th of January as a date for the enforcement of Indian Constitution. The reason was only this. Coming to next incident which happened, point 3.1 of chapter, the Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement. As you all know that Britishers, they imposed tax on salt on the people of the coastal areas, which was the livelihood of the coastal area people. These people met Mahatma Gandhi ji, and on their request on 31st of January 1930, Mahatma Gandhi ji sent a letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin stating 11 demands in the interest of general public. Although these demands were given a deadline of 11th of March, which were not fulfilled by Lord Irwin, ultimately on 12th of March, along with his 78 trusted volunteers, Mahatma Gandhi ji started his journey, his march from Sabarmati Ashram, Ahmedabad to Dandi in Gujarat coastal town. This march was 240 miles distance. In one day, Gandhiji and his followers completed 10 miles, and they completed this march in 24 days. When Gandhiji reached on the coastal area of Dandi, he had thousands of followers with him, and on 6th of April he manufactured salt by boiling in sea water, and this was the beginning of civil disobedience movement by Mahatma Gandhiji. After this incident, thousands of his volunteers were arrested. Throughout the country, this movement spreaded, which led to burning of foreign clothes, boycott of British goods, boycott of schools and colleges, liquor shops were picketed, people denied to pay any kind of tax to the Britishers. In frontier areas also, follower of Mahatma Gandhiji, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who is known as Frontier Gandhi, who was a disciple of Mahatma Gandhiji, he was arrested in April 1930. Although after his death, after his arrest, there was demonstration in most of the streets of Peshawar, and people, they fired on police. Later on, Mahatma Gandhiji was arrested, and around 1 lakh people were arrested with him. Britishers, they had taken very strict measures. Women and children were also beaten in this movement. So Gandhiji decided to call off this movement because of one pact which was signed between Lord Irwin and Mahatma Gandhiji on 5th of March 1931. This is called Gandhi-Irwin Pact. In this pact, it was decided that Gandhiji will take participation in the second round table conference. Although in first round table conference, which was held in London, Indian National Congress did not participate. Ultimately it failed. In second round table conference, Gandhiji reached London to take participation in December 1931, but there was no decision in this participation because of dispute, and people of different organizations, they had no mutual consent. Again, most of the leaders were arrested. Gandhiji was arrested, and this movement continued. Third round table conference was held, in which Indian National Congress did not participate, and it failed. Ultimately, in 1934, this movement lost its momentum and it was called off. During this movement, one was signed at Pune, which is called POONA Pact 1932. In this pact, POONA Pact, Britishers, they reserved some of the they gave some rights to depressed class through the communal award, which was considered as a method of disunity among the people. Gandhiji, he was not in favor of this separate demand of electorates for Dalits. Mahatma Gandhiji, he began a fast unto death because he believed that separate electorate for Dalits would slow down the process of unity in the society. Ultimately, in September 1932, a pact was signed between Gandhiji and other leaders. On the other hand, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Dalit movement leader, which gave reserved seats to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Now let's see how participants, they saw this movement. This is one of the important topic in this chapter. Point 3.2, that this movement which spreaded, civil disobedience movement which spreaded in the country, how people saw this movement. So first of all, let's see the example of rich peasant communities. Among these communities, Patidars of Gujarat and Jats of Uttar Pradesh, they were very active in this movement. Even they supported Mahatma Gandhi ji for his non-cooperation against the Britishers. Next is poor peasants of the country. These small tenants, they found difficult to pay their rents. They wanted the unpaid rent to the landlords. Although they were willing to take help of Indian National Congress, but Indian National Congress did not give them full support. Congress was unwilling to support this no rent campaign in most of the places. Ultimately, there was less participation of peasantry. Third is the business class people, how they saw the movement. Business class group participated in this movement, as during the First World War they made a huge profit and became powerful. Now they reacted against the colonial policies and restricted their business activities in India. They wanted protection of their import of goods. Ultimately, Indian industrial group, they formed one commercial congress in 1920, and FICCI, Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industries, in 1927. In FICCI, the prominent industrialists of India were G.D. Bidla, Purushottam Das, Thakur Das. So they supported civil disobedience movement. Next one is industrial class. That class did not participate too much in civil disobedience movement except some regions. The another is workers of the country. Workers, their participation was also very less because of these movements. They were not getting their two-time wages. They were forced to leave their jobs. Even there was no support to them for their financial help. In this movement there was an active participation of women too. They helped Mahatma Gandhi ji in all the movements. Even in Salt March, thousands of women, they came out from their homes to listen Mahatma Gandhi ji at different places. They also participated in marches, in manufacturing of salt, picketing of goods, picketing of these liquor shops. Although Gandhiji believed that it was the duty of the women to look after home and to be a good mother and good wives. In later phase, if we see that in Indian National Congress, participation was given to some Indian women, but for a long time they were not given good position in Indian National Congress in the beginning stage. Coming to some of the limits of this civil disobedience movement, this is point number 3.3 of this chapter. As you all know that in India, one social group, Dalits, they faced humiliation from last many decades. Gandhiji called untouchables Harijan. This name was given by Mahatma Gandhiji because he believed that Swaraj would not come for 100 years if untouchability was not eliminated. Gandhiji took participation in many cleanliness campaigns of that time, organized SATYAGRAH to secure them in entry to temples, access to public wells, tanks, roads, and schools. He himself cleaned toilets to dignify the work of Dalits. And the another leader who supported this depressed class was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into depressed class association in 1930. Although he had different theory about their upliftment, he wanted to have separate electorate for these Dalits. So because of these reasons, there was less participation of this group in this civil disobedience movement on the separate electoral issue. Muslim political organizations were also not happy with the Indian National Congress policies. That's why they did not participate as much as in civil disobedience movement. In India, Hindu Mahasabha and Muslim League means they had communal clash and riots in different cities. That's why there was less participation from these organizations too. Now coming to fourth part of this chapter, here you can see that sense of collective belongingness. Sense of collective belongingness, here it refers the feeling of nationalism, means when people they felt that they all are together. So this sense of collective belongingness came by fictions, folklores, songs, popular prints, symbols, reinterpretation of history. As you know that first time Bharat Mata image was created by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, and later on Abnindranath Tagore also printed his famous image of Bharat Mata, in which he portrayed an ascetic figure of Bharat Mata, in which Bharat Mata is shown calm, composed, divine and spiritual. Other painters of India also made some of the Bharat Mata paintings at later stage, like Raja Ravi Verma. So this was the feeling of togetherness among the people. Now there was a common identity for them, that they all are in a country which is represented as a Bharat Mata. In Bharat Mata you might have seen that now they felt that along with her calmness, along with her divineness and spiritual nature, she is brave, having lion, sword, bow and arrow, and she represented the courage of the nation. Later on, in 1870s, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, he wrote Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram, that was written in Anand Math, one of his famous novel, in which this national song Vande Mataram was written. This Vande Mataram song, it also brought feeling of togetherness among the people of the country. If you remember Rabindranath Tagore, he also wrote many folk songs. Indian national anthem was written by him. In different parts of the country also, like in Madras, Natesha Shastri, he published a massive 4-volume collection of Tamil folk tales, the folklore of southern India, in which Indian literature, Indian nationalism was shown to the people. During Swadeshi and boycott movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag red, green and yellow, that was designed, which had 8 lotuses representing the 8 provinces of British India, and crescent moon, which represented the Hindus and Muslims of the country. It was also a symbol of nationalism and collective belongingness among the people. In 1921, Mahatma Gandhiji also designed a Swaraj flag. Again, it had tricolor, red, green and white, and a spinning wheel in the center, which represented the Gandhian ideal of self-help. Carrying a flag holding in aloft during marches became the symbol of this defiance. Now, by these flags, people, they realized the feeling of collective belongingness, because they used Vande Mataram, they used national anthem, they used flags, posters of Bharat Mata, that was used to show their collective belongingness and unity. So by these ways, nationalism came to India. I hope I tried to cover most of the important points of this chapter. If you will listen this video very carefully, you will definitely learn this important chapter of history in class 10th. Thank you very much.